Today, we become legends.
Been a while since we looked at a god's release history, but today's episode is a very interesting one. Erlang Shen is a god that has pretty much never been buffed, save a few small things such as mana cost reductions or buff nerfs where they hit one area of his kit but buffed another one slightly to compensate. He's pretty much just received nerfs throughout his entire Smite existence. If you enjoy this type of video, definitely subscribe to the channel and help us on that road to 100k, but enough of that, let's get into this. So Erlang Shen was released into Smite on July 6, 2016, and saying he was an overpowered release is putting it lightly. He's received no major reworks, but quite a few tweaks along with a myriad of nerfs to pretty much his entire kit. In fact, I think literally every ability has been nerfed in some way since its release date. So let's cover his release stats and abilities first before we get into those nerfs. Starting it off, Erlang's passive at launch was familiar, but very different to how it is now. His passive has been changed a couple of times, but this was definitely the most broken and unstable version of it. Instead of hitting for just basic attack power, the release version of this passive was treated as an actual second basic attack on top of his normal one that did 15% of its damage. This means it could trigger item effects and could crit. This led to some pretty broken scenarios, especially with a version of Soul Eater that existed at the time that restored 3% of your max HP on basic attack hits. Similar in a way to pre-change Berserker Shield, but a lot more broken, Erlang Shen's dog would proc this item effect as well, so he would effectively double proc it and heal 6% max health every time he basic attacked an enemy god. Given Erlang Shen's fast attack chain, where he's often attacking more than once per second, it's needless to say this was very broken, and is part of the reason this passive got changed down the line. It simply limited design space on basic attack item effects such as this version of Soul Eater, because if they added anything that was too strong on auto attack hits, Erlang Shen would just break the game with it, so it was kind of needed to change this passive. Erlang's one on release was pretty similar to now. The main thing that was different about this back then was that the haste mechanic that used to be on Erlang's 3 in Mink form was tied to this ability instead. So whenever you used the one, you also had haste. Given the very low cooldown of this ability due to the cooldown resetting mechanic, having haste effect up this often was pretty problematic. It also did 10 plus 5% scaling more per hit at launch, which does add up over several basic attacks. His 2 was a very interesting ability at launch, however, where now this ability just roots enemies and they can jump or dash away. At release, this would root and cripple similar to Nox's 1, meaning you couldn't jump away when you were hit by this. This was honestly one of the most broken parts of release Erlang. It might seem like a small change to remove this cripple, but it gave him so much lockdown that he was a top support at this point, as well as his solo and jungle prowess. The duration also scaled as high as 1.75 seconds back then, where now it's 1.3 seconds at all ranks, so it even lasted longer back then on top of having additional CC. The 3 was mostly the same, aside from the lack of haste as I mentioned earlier because that was on the 1. It also did a bit more damage in both forms, and the turtle was the same speed as the mink where now it's a bit slower, but other than that it was largely the same. The ultimate similarly healed a little bit more, but once again this was mostly the same as present day Erlang ults. The main differences in Erlang Shen's release were in the passive 1 and 2. But let's get into the balance changes and tweaks Erlang has received since his release over 4 years ago. Man, just saying that makes me feel so old. Erlang Shen's been in the game for 4 years. I've been playing this game way too long. 2 patches after release in patch 3.14, Erlang's ult heal was nerfed by 60 flat and 5% max health. This was an odd one since the heal on his ult has never really been the reason Erlang is strong, but yeah, this did happen. 2 more patches followed in 3.16 and 3.21 that hit his pin ability, taking the cooldown from 12 up to 16 seconds, a 1/3 increase, and the root cripple duration from 1.15 up to 1.75 seconds to just 1.3 at all ranks. It's crazy to think how strong this ability was at launch on a 12-second cooldown, root crippling for 1.75 seconds, but of course at this point in Erlang's lifecycle it still had the cripple effect. Patch 3.23 was the patch that shifted the haste effect from the 1 onto the 3 in Mink form. This was a bigger nerf than it seems, since when this was on Erlang's 1 he could just run down anyone he wanted because of the insanely low cooldown of spot weakness compared to 72 transformations. 1 second was also taken off the shield duration and attack speed increase here on the 3 as well. With the launch of Season 4 in February 2017, the cripple was finally removed from Erlang's 2. This was a very big hit to his usefulness and pretty much took him off the map for support where previously it was arguably his best role. A rare buff came in patch 4.9, but it was very minor, just a slight base power and attack speed per level increase for him to lean more into his damage over his crowd control, which was kind of a theme they'd been going with since his release. But then the nerfs continued, with patch 4.19 bringing another hit to the duration of the Mink attack speed and haste, while also hitting the damage by 20 at all ranks. This was especially important for his early game wave clear and camp clear in the jungle, where the damage went from 90 down to 70, another 20% decrease there. With all the nerfs Pin had taken since launch, it kinda became a not so great ability, so they bumped up the scaling on it by 10% in patch 5.5 while reducing the CDR effect of the 1. Followed up by a mana cost reduction to the 1 as well, plus a buff to the taunt duration on the ult in patch 5.19. This took it from 0.8 up to 1.2 seconds to just 1.2 seconds all the time. A welcome buff since 0.8 seconds of CC on an ultimate felt pretty bad. This was one of those buff nerf patches I was talking about where he gets a little bit of a buff in one area of his kit but also a nerf in other areas. Patch 5.18 on October 1st, 2018 brought the rework to his passive, changing the dog to do max health damage instead of basic attack damage, which removed the broken interactions with items such as Berserker Shield double proccing their passive effects. However, this new passive was broken in a different way, mostly just the fact that 2% max health on top of your normal basic attack damage plus the 1's damage just made him an absolute shred machine. Like I said before, Erlang Shen's attack chain really complements this type of effect because it's so fast and low damage on all the swings, so you get a lot of auto attacks off in a short period of time, so doing 2% max health every time you hit someone was just really broken. So they basically traded out one broken passive for another here. However, this was swiftly nerfed 3 patches later in patch 5.21 where they literally halved the effectiveness of the dog from 2% to 1% max health. This may seem like a harsh nerf, but it was well deserved. As someone who played through this era of Erlang, he did insane amounts of damage from just basic attacks alone at this point. We're not quite done for Season 5 changes yet though. One more patch in December 2018 nerfed the damage on the 1 and implemented the slower speed mechanic for using the turtle. The 1 and 3 became the subjects of even more nerfs throughout Season 6, with a nerf to the base damage now on the 1, where the scaling was nerfed before, and finally, the removal of haste from Erlang's kit entirely was done in patch 6.10, while also decreasing the base damage on the turtle form of the 3 as well. This was part of a large initiative to remove haste from the base kits of many gods and slap it onto items such as Hasten Katana and Hasten Ring. And that's it for Erlang Shen's balance changes over the years. He's not been touched at all in Season 7 so far, and I can see why. He's in a pretty good spot right now in my opinion, despite his turbulent history and many nerfs. Seeing all these balance patches here really puts into perspective how strong Erlang was at release, and he's definitely an underrated release that a lot of people wouldn't even class as that OP, but he definitely was. But that's it from me on this one. Let me know who you want to see covered next on the release history episodes, and I'll catch you guys in another one later on. Have a great day, and peace out you nerds.